looking at civilization in the Andes. We've done North America. We've done Mesoamerica. And today we're going to talk about South America. Have we talked about South America really at all before? So it's a new place on the earth, right? So what's the first thing we got to talk about? The geography, all right? So physically, South America can be divided into three general regions. So there's three physical different regions in South America. You have the mountains and the highlands. The mountains and the highlands. Looking at this physical map of South America, which part of South America do you think has the mountains and the highlands? Which direction? Huh?
Like the southern, like west.
Southwest? Yeah, like this general region here. And that would be actually where the Andes are, this region on the western side. Okay? So yeah, that's the mountains and the highlands. All right? Another key aspect into the physical regions of South America is river basins. Now you really can't see the rivers from this particular physical map. Like this is a map picture taken from space, so it's tough to see a river. But pretty much all of this is a river basin, and it all flows into one main river. And what is the biggest river in the world? The Amazon. And that is located right in the heart of South America. And all of this area of land, this lush green land, drains all of it into the Amazon River. Now, if you remember, we said the Nile River was the longest, and it is. It's the longest. But as far as the volume of water and the amount of water that is being moved, the Amazon is way larger. Way larger. It's the largest river in the world. Okay? Also, you'll see we're going to look at some coastal plains. Okay? Coastal plains. And with the exception of right here where the Andes are, there's a lot of flat land surrounding basically the entire coast of South America. And as you can see, it's a lot of coast. A lot of coastline. Okay? So I got some pictures. Here's some mountain pictures, like the Andes Mountains. It is the Andes Mountains. This is how you spell Andes. It's not like the name Andy. Andes. The Andes Mountains are the largest mountains in South America, but they're not the largest mountains in the world, but they're the largest mountains in South America. The largest mountain is this one here on the left. Anybody want to try to pronounce what that mountain's name is? Brady. Aconcagua. Aconcagua is the largest mountain in South America. It is 22,838 feet high. That is very high. Remember, Mount Everest was only like 24,000. So it's not far behind it. It's a very tall mountain. So are the Andes a pretty large mountain chain? Yeah, very large, very tall mountains. And Aconcagua is the largest. Aconcagua. It's fun to say. All right. We talked about the coastal plain, we talked about the Amazon River and the river basins. And the Amazon River is the largest river in the world. And as you can see by this map, you can see just how much water drains and how much of South America drains into this main artery of the Amazon. That's a lot. Now, I want you to remember, this is not like desert land right here. This is tropical rainforest that is draining. So we're talking massive amounts of water. All being drained into the largest river in the world, the Amazon. Okay? And we also mentioned the coastal plains. The coastal plains are found on both coasts, east and west of South America. What is a plain? Something that goes up in the air. Is that a plane? Well, it is, but not the kind of plane we're talking about in geography. Emily, please cover your nose. What kind are we talking about? What's a plane geographical? Heath.
Flat area.
Very flat. It's very flat. Now, a coastal plain is an area of very low, flat land. When I say low, I mean it's low in elevation, not elevated in the mountains. And it's obviously, if it's a coastal plain, it's going to be next to a seacoast. The largest of the South American coastal plains are found on the northeastern coast. You guys ever watch the Olympics when they were in Rio? Remember, like, that's Brazil. And Brazil has a lot of coastal plains because it's northeastern South America. These coastal plains generally run in a north-south direction, while the highlands and the mountains run the opposite, east to west. Okay? And these coastal plains you would think would be really great for farming. Not really. They're pretty dry. Pretty dry. Okay, pretty dry areas. So not necessarily located in the tropical rainforest, because that's not very dry. Okay? All right. Now, we've talked about the geography, and it's a little bit diverse. You know, it's very, very tropical in South America. You know, there's not a lot of tundra or anything, but you get up into those upper elevations, it's very cold up there. So we're going to look at a civilization that was very successful in taming the geography of South America, and that was the Inca. The Inca. Most people in South America, whether they were Inca or not, lived. Now, this is all pre-Columbian. What's pre-Columbian mean? Before what? Before what?
Columbus.
Before Christopher Columbus comes. Because when Columbus comes, things change dramatically. So this is all pre-Columbian, what we're doing here. But the Inca, their main thing was agriculture, just like most ancient civilizations. And the key crop that they grew is what this guy's looking at right here. We call it corn, they call it maize. Very good, amazing. So maize or corn. They also grew a lot of peanuts, potatoes, cotton. As the climate of South America is very, very good for growing. I mean, it's hot. It gets a lot of water. I mean, it's good. You can grow about anything. And the Inca were, they were known for that. Their lives, centered around warfare and agriculture. But the Incas were most notable for establishing their empire in pre-Columbian America, which was centered in what is now the present-day country of Peru. Peru. Anybody ever heard of Peru? At least heard of it? Okay, Peru's kind of on the west coast of South America. A lot of it is in the Andes Mountains, so they're mountainous people. And the Inca people, their lives centered around warfare. Who are they fighting? Before Columbus arrives. Who are they fighting? They're fighting other South Americans. They're fighting other tribes. For what? What do you think they were fighting over? Control of resources. Land, water. That's what they wanted. That's what they were controlling and fighting over. So the leader of the Inca that kind of brought it all together, his name is Pakakuri. Isn't that a fun name to say? Pakakuri. That's his picture there on the left as far as we can tell. And that's how you spell it, Pakakuri. He launched a campaign to create a large empire. Pakakuri sounds like a very nice, cuddly name. Not a nice, cuddly man. He created an empire where he conquers 12 million people. You don't do that with hugs and high fives. You do that with violence. And that's how Pakakuri was able to unite the majority of the western half of South America under his empire. Okay? Through violence. And about 12 million people were a part of the Inca Empire. 12 million. And all of the empire that they built was built on war. Every young man that lived in the Inca Empire was a warrior. It was a warlike. They were a warlike people. All right. They would go from place to place throughout South America, conquer places, and not everybody had the same language and culture. And he forced their culture and language on them. And the language of the Inca is called Quechua. Quechua. See this? Quechua. Okay? That's the language of the Inca. And he would force conquered people to learn that language and make them abandon their own. So, and he was very successful. He was very successful. In fact, his empire grew to be so large, he couldn't even control it. So he had to divide it up into 4 different parts. Each part was called a quarter, okay, because he divided it into 4. And each quarter he gave like to a cousin or to a brother or to a son, a family member, to go act and to rule that quarter as a governor, but he's going to be the ultimate guy in charge, as the emperor, all right? So each quarter had a governor, and then they divided it down even further. Each quarter had like provinces that were divided down further. They were all, and all the loyalty went up to Pakakuri, all right? So it's kind of similar to what we do. You know, we have a country, and our country's divided into 50 different states, and each state's divided into different counties, and each county's divided, has cities and towns and wards, you know, whatever, however, places do it. So the Inca were doing that hundreds of years ago, long before us. So if you lived in the Inca Empire, you had to provide labor to the emperor every year. Meaning if you were a farmer, you had to leave your home and report to a certain place and say, I'm here to provide for my several weeks of labor to the emperor. Like you had to quit your job and go work for the government. And the major thing that they wanted the labor for was for building roads. And when you left your home and you left your family to go work, that's called the mita. That was your forced labor requirement. Can you imagine if we had that in America? Like, oh, okay, guys, you'll have a substitute the next 3 weeks because I got to go build roads for the government. I have to do it. And then it happened every year, and every able-bodied person had to go do that. That's how the Inca operated. And do you think that they got some stuff built? You think they got some stuff built? They did. They got lots of stuff built. And the major building project that they did was roads. Now you can see they got a picture here on the left. This is one of their roads. Okay. Now obviously this is going uphill, so it's some steps. But I mean, you're not driving a car on it. It's a footpath. It's a footpath. Okay. But these footpaths are going over through the Andes Mountains. You know, imagine making a road over Mount Everest or Aconcagua. Not an easy thing to do. All right? So, but that was what they did. And they were very successful, and they built lots of roads. In fact, they built like 24,000 miles of roads. That's enough to go around the planet. 24,000 miles worth of roads. And the way they would build these roads, because look, they got these, and then another one going down, and then there's cross sections. Okay, so there's lots of roads here. And the way they would build these roads is like, okay, so you start here, and you're going to walk for one day. And you start in the morning. And by the time it gets dark, you're going to come to a place where there's a rest area. And you can go inside and be safe so you don't get eaten by something. This is like the rainforest, okay? So they would have like rest areas. I don't want to call them hotels and restaurants, but they would have a place where you could seek shelter at night. And they were all 1 day's walk apart. So they were well planned, and it's kind of like a modern rest area. Literally a rest area. You go and sleep and get some rest. And then you get up in the morning, and you walk another day, and by the time it gets dark, you come across another rest area. So pretty well thought out, pretty popular amongst people who had to travel. So, and that was the Inca. That's some of the things the Inca did in order to expand their empire. And because they had these roads, you could live way down here in the southern part of the empire, and you could get information from the people in the northern part of the empire pretty quickly because these roads were easy to walk on, and they were safe for the most part. Okay? All right, so questions on their building and their projects? Okay? A little bit about their culture. An interesting thing about the Inca is they did not have a system of writing. We've looked at the Olmecs and the Toltecs and how they used hieroglyphics, and the Aztecs. Most of their stuff's been destroyed by the Spanish. But the Inca had no system of writing. But they were really great at business. How did they keep records? Because they had to keep records. And the way in which they kept records was by using this thing called a quipu. There's another funny word to say. Quipu. What's a quipu? It's actually way more complicated than a system of writing. I guarantee you could learn your 26-letter alphabet easier than you could learn to use a quipu. This is a necklace, okay? It's a necklace that you tie around your neck. And all of these strings have a meaning. And you tie knots in the strings, and the location on the string where you tie the knot means something. So you would have to learn each string and the different locations on the string where there are knots and what those knots mean. That is their system of record keeping. Pretty complex. I'd much rather learn to write cat and dog than, tie the third string and knot 4 inches down and then loop it around another. That's how it was done. Very difficult to learn. So these people were not unintelligent. They just did not have a system of writing that was efficient. Does that make sense? Okay. So that's the quipu. That was the way in which they kept records. Now, when it came to like culture, like what they did for entertainment, they had some poetry. But how'd they learn the poetry? Did they pick up a book and read it? Why couldn't they pick up a book and read it? Because they didn't have a system of writing. How'd they learn poetry? Yeah, the oral tradition. They listen to their parents and grandparents recite this poetry to them, and when they grow up, they have it memorized, and then they recite it to their kids and grandkids. And it gets passed down orally from generation to generation. So they had an oral tradition. Get your hand up? Oh, okay, no problem. Another thing that they did was like, I'm not going to call it theater performances, but they did have places where they could go and they would perform reenactments. You guys know, you ever heard, like the Americans do reenactments? What do you think they were reenacting? Same thing we reenact. You ever heard of a reenactment going on in America? A Civil War reenactment? What goes on there? They reenact battles. They did the same thing. They would talk about great battles that occurred, great victories that occurred, and they would reenact them. They would have actors, and they would basically go out there and like pretend stab each other with sticks and clubs, and people would watch it, and yay, and they'd cheer for the side that won, which was always the Inca. Okay, so that's one of the things they did. No writing or reading required for that. Okay, you just go out and pretend to bash each other in the head. All right, and then everybody cheers at the end. You guys ever met an Inca person? How come? I wonder why. They're gone. They're gone. They're extinct. They no longer exist. What happened to them? The Europeans is what happened to them. They were conquered by Europeans, in particularly the Spanish, and eventually the Portuguese a little bit. But the mainly was Spanish. And the person responsible for being the conquistador of the Inca was Francisco Pizarro. And we got covered this. Francisco Pizarro. This is him right here. In all his glory. You will need to know the difference between the conquistador that conquers the Aztecs and the conquistador that conquers the Inca. They are different. Who is the conquistador that conquered the Aztecs? Brought all that gold back. He drew the line on the wall. Hey, Montezuma, fill this room with gold. What was his name?
Cortez.
Hernan Cortez. He conquered the Aztecs. Francisco Pizarro conquers the Inca. They are both conquistadors, Spanish conquerors. Pizarro does it a little differently. Pizarro arrives in South America with 180 men. Each of these men are armed with steel weapons, swords, pikes, knives. They have guns, they have gunpowder, and they have horses. These are all things that the Inca do not have. The Inca do not have steel. They have sharpened sticks and bows and arrows. The Inca do not have armor. They have thick leather or, animal hide for shields. They do not have guns or gunpowder. They have bow and arrow. And with 180 men, Francisco Pizarro is able to overtake an empire of 12 million people. He has a little bit of help. And the help that he gets is an invisible help in the form of disease called smallpox, which is a horrible, disgusting, nasty, deadly disease. Okay? So you think coronavirus is bad. Smallpox has killed millions and millions and millions. Millions and millions, all right, over its existence. We don't worry much about it now because we have immunities and we also have vaccines and antibodies. We don't. It's kind of a dead disease now. It can still happen, but it's very rare. Now, the Europeans, when they arrive in the 1500s, they've lived throughout the Middle Ages in Europe. They've survived the Black Plague. They've survived living in crowded, disgusting, nasty cities where they have no plumbing and they just throw their chamber pots out in the street every morning. And that's what you lived in. How do you think their immune systems were? Good, strong. They got lots of practice because they were exposed to dirt and filth and bacteria and disgustingness on a daily basis and had been for hundreds of years. So when these Europeans arrive and they shake hands with the Inca, who have been living clean in beautiful nature, never been exposed to any plagues or bacteria like that, and when they are exposed, they have no immunity whatsoever to it. And so not only does it kill them, it kills them fast. I mean, they have no ability to fight it off. And we're talking like 95% of the people, of the indigenous people in the Western Hemisphere are gone. They are killed, whether it be through battle, through fighting, or through disease. Mostly disease. Okay? So, and it doesn't matter how wealthy you were. Even Pachacuti dies of it. He dies of smallpox. All right, it doesn't matter how much they don't. Microbes and bacteria don't care how much gold's in your pocket. All right, so much like the Inca did to the tribal people they conquered, the Spanish do the same thing to the Inca. The Spanish forced their culture, their language, and their religion on the Inca, and they dominate that region forever. Forever. What is the number one spoken language in South America? Spanish. What are the majorities of people in South America's religion? Catholic. And it's all because of what the Spanish brought and forced upon them. They don't speak Spanish in Brazil because they were conquered by a different empire, the Portuguese, Portugal. And they speak Portuguese in Brazil, but that's still a European power who did the exact same thing. Okay? So disease, technology, and horses were the downfall of civilization for all Native American civilizations. Questions? Okay, that's all I have today.